welcome, sir. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
And by the way, Wynn does not go anywhere without his personal bodyguard. No, I'm sorry, I don't have your name, but and Wynn, introduce your accomplice.
Well, Ron is a very valued member of an organization called Friends of Arizona Highways, which runs Arizona Highways photo workshops. It's a separate 501c3 organization that supports and extends the mission of the magazine. So Ron's here to keep me on the straight and narrow.
That's awesome. Well, boy, anybody here, round of applause if you've never seen an Arizona Highways magazine. And if you clap, show yourself out. It is truly one of the, it's truly one of the great magazines, and congratulations. And how did you get involved, and what's your history with Arizona Highways?
Well, I literally had my 16th anniversary with the magazine about 4 days ago. So I've been there that length of time. The magazine, one of the things that's not well known is the magazine's owned by the state of Arizona. Although we get no funding from the state of Arizona, we have to operate out of what's called an enterprise fund, which dumbed down so I can understand it, means that we have to run it more like a business, which is why we sell subscriptions and single copies and books, and we'll talk about that stuff later. So I had been at Phoenix Magazine as editor-in-chief and publisher for 9 years. This is when Del and Jewel Lewis at Channel 3 owned it, and had the opportunity to replace the publisher who was leaving for a new job in San Francisco.
That's great. What an iconic magazine. If you don't mind, tell the little story about when you were 5 years old. And
oh, not at all. Well, as a setup to the story, when I first moved here from Chicago in 1980, we lived in Mesa for 18 years, and I had several terms on the Parks Board. All of my kids went through Mesa Public Schools. We have great affection for this community. But my first introduction to Arizona, I was 5 years old. We were at my grandmother's house in Detroit. She had a copy of Arizona Highways on her coffee table. It had a saguaro cactus on the cover, and I said, there's no tree that looks like that, as a wise 5-year-old will. And she said, oh, yeah, there is, and took the opportunity, since she was a former educator, to sit me down and page by page go through the magazine. So I told my dad then, I said, I want to go there, I want to see that place. And it took a long, long time, but we finally got here.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of which, is there a corner of the world that Arizona Magazines is not?
Well, Mark, we have subscribers in all 50 states and 110 countries around the world.
Wow.
Now, in Uzbekistan, we have 1 subscriber, but it counts as a country. So
it's Borat.
That's right. That's exactly right. As you would expect, the major foreign countries like Canada, France, Germany, that are feeder markets, as Mark and other people associated with the tourism community would tell you, those are the bulk of the subscribers that are out of the country. And about 40% of our total subscriber file are gift subscriptions, which means that people here in Arizona mostly send a subscription to a friend of theirs or a family member someplace else in the world.
That's awesome. I know magazines, this is a tough time to do business as a magazine, but you guys don't seem to be hurting.
Well, clearly our subscriber base has eroded. If you go back past 25 years when all of magazines as an industry have essentially been totally changed. And we're not immune to that. Our files have really declined as well. But where we're really blessed is, as a niche publication, technical term, of course, we're fortunate that we do what nobody else in the world does, and that's provide iconic photography and history and stories about exactly what to do in and around Arizona.
Your photographers are amazing, and the scenes they catch, whether it's lightning or haboobs or whatever. Are they Arizona-based, most of them?
Yeah,
or?
almost all of them are Arizona-based. And we, both our photographers and our writers, we have a total of just under 300 combined from that population, are all Arizonans. Not every single one, but the vast majority. David Munch, for instance, lives up north in Colorado and spends some time in Montana. But most of them are here. Example, you mentioned Tucson. Jack Dykinga, Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer based in Tucson, has been a contributor to the magazine for about 30 years. What's interesting, I think, is, and not everyone knows, is that they're all freelance contributors. We have no staff photographers at all. So we're really blessed, though, that the best of the best want their work to appear in the magazine.
Well, if you're ever looking for a new photographer, I know a guy who's Mesa-based, who's the best, and He's roaming around here. He's at the back of the room right there.
That
Yvonne
guy?
Martinez.
That guy?
Yeah.
Well, Yvonne is another great volunteer of Friends of Arizona Highways, and I really think it would. Sorry, I'm not trying to take your job, but it probably.
He's good at that.
I'm hoping you will.
As long as your son's not, I won't try either. But it might help for folks to understand what Friends does and is and how they work with us, and I'll let Ron handle that if it's okay
Ron,
with you.
take it away.
Yeah, Friends of Arizona Highways was started as a 501c3 30 years ago. In fact, we just celebrated last year, 2015, our 30th anniversary. It was started by Hugh Harrelson, former publisher, that had an idea of how they wanted to promote Arizona, get it out so that the rest of the world knew Arizona, and they thought they could do that through photography. Jack Dykinga, that Wynn just mentioned, was one of the first members of the board. We have a number of workshops. Our motto is educate, motivate, and inspire. And we do photo workshops based on Arizona and getting the beauty of Arizona out, Monument Valley areas, and the surrounding states. We do workshops varied from 1 day long to 2 weeks long. It's expanded over the years. We have in the neighborhood of 18 to 20 photographers. Many of them are photographers that contribute to the magazine that lead these workshops. We have a group of volunteers in the neighborhood of 30 that go along these workshops and handle the logistics. So a person taking these workshops really doesn't have to worry about anything or think about anything except photography and learning their camera. We go from, like I said, the 1 day workshops where we've had a person walk into the workshop with his camera still in the box. When they left, they knew how to use the camera. We just finished, we do have expanded, we do workshops from Vancouver to Florida and from Maine to San Diego. We just finished our first truly international workshop. In fact, the leaders just returned Wednesday night to China. All of our photographers and trip leaders have the expertise and the knowledge of the areas you're going. So you learn photography, but you're also learning about the culture.
So clearly, our mission, as we have stated it, is to drive tourism to and through the state. And Friends of Arizona Highways extends and enhances that mission beautifully.
Has there been any way to kind of track the impact of Arizona magazines on tourism?
Actually, about some of your viewers and people in the audience may remember that about 9 years ago, there was a move in the state legislature to sell off and get rid of state assets, including things like state fairgrounds and some other state buildings. Arizona Highways Magazine was mentioned as one of the assets they were going to sell. So we thought would be appropriate to try to figure out what we were really worth. And so we commissioned the Arizona State University College of Business to do an economic impact study. We told them we don't want any of these funny numbers that you see that are so high, you know they're bogus. So we want them to be realistic. We didn't want to do all sorts of silly extensions and multipliers, just straight up, what can they prove the subscriber base does in terms of travel and tourism spending within Arizona. And the answer they received was $68 million annually. So you remember I told you that the magazine is owned by the state. We receive no money from the state. And I recognize the folks back here with the investment firm would probably agree that a zero-cost asset that brings in $68 million a year is pretty good return. So we alerted the state to the fact that whatever they would get for it on the open market would pale in comparison to the annual economic impact. And for once at the legislature, wisdom prevailed.
Wow. Can you document that they listen to you?
Well, we're still owned by the state, and I still got a gig, so, you know.
That's awesome. Well, you know, as a transplanted Midwesterner, I have friends come out all the time, and it's amazing. They think it's all desert. And when you take them to different corners of this great state, they see, you know, if you're up in the White Mountains or Flagstaff or whatever, you just see a whole different world up there. And you guys do such a great job of bringing that to your pages and letting the world know about it. So,
thanks, Mark.
How did you get to be a publisher?
Well, it was kind of by accident. I was at Phoenix Magazine, as I said, as editor-in-chief and publisher, and Del and Jewel were offered this obscene amount of money by a company based in Texas to buy Channel 3. And so they were beginning to sell off the assets. And they sold the magazine to a guy I had formerly done some business with, and I knew he wanted to do what I did. So I was getting ready to do, what am I going to do next? And think about starting a business or doing consulting, the usual thing when you have no clue what you're going to do. And got a call from the publisher at that time, a gal named Nina LaFrance, who said, if you want this job, it's yours, basically. And it was pure dumb luck. And it's been an absolute blessing. I don't know anyone who, in our business, who wouldn't want to be associated with the kind of a brand that Arizona Highways represents, and a 91-year-old magazine that has done what virtually no other magazine has done. Smithsonian did a study maybe a dozen years ago, Mark, and they were looking for magazines that are the most collected, retained, and number one is National Geographic. Number two in the world is Arizona Highways magazine. So it's remarkable.
That is awesome.
Thank you.
Well, one of my favorite questions, just pretend we've got a little crystal ball here and you can look into it. You've been with them 16 years.
Yes,
what do
sir.
the next 16 years look like in your industry?
Well, I think it's clear that the evolution, some have said devolution, to digital is going to continue. I believe that in a niche publication environment, there will always be a place for some printed product, but digital is going to be the driving force. When you look at the image quality that you can get now on tablets and the enhancement of things like retina displays and all, I mean, to try to push that tide back is not going to happen. But what I do think is going to happen, and that we'll see more and more of, is our industry from a newsstand perspective. There are two companies now. When I started at the magazine, there were 19 companies that were involved in magazine distribution, meaning getting it from our printer to the newsstands that you see at grocery stores or bookstores or whatever. There are now two. And so there's been tremendous collapse in that business. That's going to have an impact on people's ability to get a hold of hard copy magazines. And as that becomes more difficult, digital is going to prevail. But back to the original point, I don't think you're going to see a complete absence of printed product. And as a niche publication that focuses on landscape photography, as we discussed, I think Arizona Highways is well positioned to be a long-term player. I mean, what the heck? We're 9 years away from the 100th anniversary of the magazine.
It's amazing. Anybody have any, we've got a couple of minutes. Anybody have any questions for Win or Ron or both? Right up here. Yes, sir.
Yes, you did an issue at one time where you had something represented in
All
each of the
50 states.
Yes. You're going to do it again?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. The question revolved around an issue that we did the first time in 1984, which was a place in Arizona that looks like one of the 50 states. Every place in Arizona that looks like someplace else. And you know what? That's the second most collectible issue that we have, behind only the turquoise issue that some of you may remember. So we revisited that concept in like 2002, I believe. And again, it was wildly successful, wildly popular. But what was interesting about it is this time, instead of just saying, here's a picture of a house in Snowflake, it looks like Utah, we literally asked the photographer when they submitted them, where is it in Indiana or Iowa or New York, specifically where. So we had a photograph of a stonecutter's quarry in Bloomington, Indiana, an area here that looked like that. And we identified that in a cut line in the magazine. And we got the most vitriolic letter from a subscriber in Indiana who said, you guys are full of it, you're lying. That is the Stonecutter's Quarry in Bloomington, Indiana. I know that because I went skinny dipping there every weekend in high school. So I sent that subscriber back a letter, Dear Mrs. Clark, thank you very much for your letter, but here's the original print of where we were. So will we do that again? Absolutely. What's hard with a magazine like Arizona Highways is to make sure you keep content as fresh as you can. So now that it's been, 14 years, yeah, about time to do it again.
That's a great question. I'm not aware of that. That's a cool.
It's a wonderful issue.
Any other questions? Yes, at the back.
We're blessed here in Arizona with two great organizations, self-funded, KJZZ and yourselves. Have you
So the question there related to KJAZ, obviously National Public Radio in Arizona, and I'd extend that to include KAET, which is public television in Phoenix, and the magazine partnering, and extending the reach of both. And the answer is yes, and we do that from time to time. Channel 8 did a series called Arizona Stories, and the magazine's content featured prominently in it. You're aware that there is an Arizona Highways television program that airs now, and we don't own that. We license the content to Robin Sewell's production company, but we receive compensation for it, and obviously brand lift, an extension of that. So the short answer is it's been very difficult for us to align content from the magazine with broadcast. It just does a monthly publication and a daily, weekly broadcast on radio is really hard to do. We've struggled with trying to figure out a way to do it better. Where we have found more fertility, candidly, is when we look to market to each other's subscribers or friends or supporters or whatever, because people who are interested in radio, television about Arizona tend to be interested about magazines about Arizona. That's been very productive. But I sure would be open to it if you got any ideas.
Real quick, if we got one last question, I think we will steal a couple of minutes from these gentlemen. If not, if someone's interested, what's the easiest way to get a subscription?
The easiest way is to go right back to the table that Friends of Arizona Highways has, and there's a card that our subscription department got so, not that, don't use that, don't use that. The young woman in the audience has a subscriber card from inside the magazine. No, you'll pay retail, you don't want to do that. We have cards in the back that are discounted subscriptions. Our normal annual rate is $24, this is $18. Now, what usually happens is the pitchforks come out at this point from people who are subscribers and who say, you dirty bird, I paid 24 and you're giving to these clowns for 18. If you are a current subscriber and want to extend your subscription for a year at that $18 rate, simply write current subscriber on that card. It's postage paid. You don't have to send them any money now. You don't have to give us a check, a credit. Just go ahead and send it in, and they'll extend your subscription, or we'd be delighted to offer you a new one. Also, for those I think there were 6 people who clapped when they've never seen the magazine. For all of you, there is a copy of the magazine in the back issue. You're welcome to take one of those and share it with a friend or keep it yourself. We'd love to have you do that.
That's great. Well, we thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. How about a nice round of applause for Win and Ron?
Thank you.